all know, especially after these amazing speakers, we live in very special times. We also know we live in distressing times. As David Suzuki once said, never in the history of the world have so many of us known so little about so much. As you watch the recent nuclear crisis unfold, in a country with both the discipline and the means to apply the highest level of knowledge, wasn't it painful to watch fire trucks spray water on exposed spent nuclear fuel rods? So where do we begin? I feel pretty overwhelmed by how many world events we've seen recently. How about you? The worst flooding in Australia's history following droughts, massive social unrest leading to the toppling of governments in North Africa, a 40% reduction of the ozone layer over the Arctic this last winter, a problem we thought we had addressed. A 25% increase in the price of fuel, and an unprecedented increase in the US money supply, leading to rapid devaluation of the world currency. And all this right after the biggest story of the last decades, the economic collapse in 2008 that we all so well remember, seen by many as a massive fraud that was committed by global bankers. Who was defrauded? All of us, it seems. Will anyone be held accountable? It seems not. Turns out there were no rules. Where do we go to make sense of all this? We feel stuck trying to grapple with any single event adequately. Many of us feel numb, helpless. We tune out, search for some good news. Some offer simple answers. Others distract themselves, change the subject. Too depressing, they say. What I've noticed is that the line between natural and human-caused disasters is blurring. Maybe if the Fukushima nuclear plant wasn't built 50 meters from the seashore, a nuclear meltdown could have been avoided. If our thinking was longer term, slower, smaller, and perhaps more global, would the result be different? Would the lines be less blurry? It seems to me that at the human level, it doesn't matter what the cause of the calamity was. We somehow, as a human family, need to respond. How do we respond? In order to suggest a possible way forward, I'm first going to go back in history. 220 years ago, in the French Revolution, people overthrew the aristocracy. Their vision was liberty, equality, and brotherhood. In today's terms, we would call brotherhood community. Community is the feeling of kinship with and closeness to a group of people around us. Today, one only has to look at the uprising of the communities of citizens in North Africa and the Middle East to see how a struggling community works again on those two first priorities of liberty and equality. But now about community. My own sense of community started when I was a child. I grew up on a farm in Switzerland. The farm had about 20 cows for milking, a few hundred orchard trees and grain, potatoes and strawberries, a little bit of everything. I learned that to live and work is to live in harmony with those around me and with nature. A farming family with a small piece of land depends completely on nature and on each other. For all the work to get done in time, it was obvious we all had to help. It wasn't always the perfect picture of unity in my family, but we all knew that it took all of us to get the job done. We all had to rely on each other, our community. In 1991, 15 years after I came to Canada, I was part of starting a small new initiative, one that would try to make a difference in the lives of low-income people. Over the years, we developed training programs, micro-business, startup, and loan programs. And in 2000, we added financial literacy and savings programs. Today, Momentum works with over 4,000 people. As we began to tell the story of Momentum, what struck me is how often people would say, "What you're doing is great. It's exactly what we need here." I would turn around and say, "So what do you like about it?" Almost always the answer would come back that these people will become independent. That answer always left me feeling a bit deflated. Why? Because I believe independence is an illusion. You see, I believe, and our work has proven, just as I had learned on the farm, we can only succeed if we do things together. And 15 years later, we have enough experience and patterns to know that what our participants are taking away from Momentum is interdependence, not independence. Ultimately, we build community. What does all this have to do with what's going on in the world today? Part of the answer comes from an economist who published a classic in 1973, E.F. Schumacher, in Small is Beautiful. His ideas are far more inspiring to me than the conventional economic wisdom of bigger is better, which is measured in large part by how much we buy, as shown in GDP growth. Schumacher became intimately acquainted with the problems of energy supply. And imagine, this was the 60s, early 70s. Meanwhile, his interests in gardening, Buddhism, and Gandhi pushed him to expand his economic thinking. Not many economists today question growth. In fact, most count on it. He questioned economic growth and proposed a radically different relationship between human beings and technology in order to bring about more fulfilling working lives. The purpose of technology up until this point today has been to produce as much output per labor input as possible. All the machines in the world invented for this purpose have not only served the dubious end of making workers redundant, but their prohibitively high cost discourages self-employment. As a result, Schumacher proposes an intermediate technology, one which requires more workers and can easily be purchased by poor people. In his model, more people have satisfying work right where they live, in their communities. So how does all this fit together? What do the disasters we're seeing today have to do with economic growth? Let me try and connect the dots. The lack of community is connected with an economic system that has become completely dependent on growth and thereby on consumerism. It is fair to say that as long as we simply buy more and more and more, we will not succeed in building community. Individualism and this illusion of independence have led to an every person for themselves mentality. Growth and consumerism, in turn, rely on cheap sources of energy and an earth that doesn't ask to be paid for the resources it provides us. But how can we stop this cycle? Gardening is one of my hobbies. It gives me great satisfaction, both as an outlet for my creative side as well as a concrete step to grow more food locally. One thing I have learned from gardening is I can't make plants grow. I'd love to, in this weather especially. I can give them the best soil. I can fertilize them. It helps, but grow they must do on their own. I have learned that all I can do is to create the conditions for the plants to grow and flourish through good care. And so it is with community. We can't create community, but we can create the conditions that help communities flourish. And so here are 3 things that each of us can think about and contribute towards. when we think about building community. Question growth. I'm sure if there is an economist in the room, the first question I would get is this: do you even know what you're talking about questioning growth? If we don't have growth, we'll have massive unemployment. I recognize this isn't simple, but what I want each of you to think about is be more radical and deeper in your thinking. Think longer term. Think deeper. Think smaller, not shorter. Secondly, we need to define a moral global compass. This is not easy. A compass there where true north points in the direction of social, economic, and environmental justice. Those are big words, I realize. No matter which definition one uses, justice always builds on a sense of equality. We need to define a global constitution of sorts, based on the reality of global economic ties that have bound us all together in the last couple of decades. However, this code of ethics needs to treat the Earth as an equal partner in the quest for global stability and survival. And thirdly, we need to ask questions. Many of us have lost sight of the big picture. For example, many citizens in Western societies are deeply and rightfully concerned about government spending as debt is piling up. Yet very few of us understand with any sense of proportions where the money goes. Some of the largest budget line items are never challenged. For example, last year, the US spent close to 50% of tax revenues on the military. On top of it, the Department of Defense is deemed unauditable. The auditors conclude that there are material internal control weaknesses. Sounds like a mess to me. I believe we have lost our ability to truly analyze because we have lost any useful sense of proportions. Instead of genuine information, we get a news story or spin, a soundbite, and we don't question. We need to dig deeper, look for, and demand better information. Some of us say rather flippantly as we depart from one another, take care. I think this captures the essence of our task today as human beings, to take good care. It's important to take care of ourselves, of course, of those around us, of our communities, our city, our country, and ultimately our global family. Today, more than ever, this means to take care of the earth, of nature, of all that sustains life. Use all resources as though they were precious. They are. Thank you. And more importantly, take care.